So now we're going to go way back in the time machine to 1990. I bet you didn't know, Josh, that No Doubt was around in 1992. They didn't just come
I did
out of
not.
the ether from 1996. I bet you also didn't know that they were playing live as early as 1987, Josh,
No,
around Arts. Yes, so
that's crazy.
this would represent 5 years into their career. And they have an interesting story their first 5 years. There was an original co-lead singer. He unfortunately committed suicide. His name was John Spence. There were lots of members at the beginning. In fact, if I remember correctly, none of the four primary members of No Doubt were original members of the band. I think it was Gwen was invited to join the band by her brother, who's still in the band at this point, Eric Stefani, and the band was mostly him and his friends. And Gwen comes in, she gets added. I want to say she was like 16 when she joined the band, if I remember correctly, in
Okay, geez.
'87.
Yeah.
And then Tony Kanal comes shortly after that, and I think Tom DeMott and Adrian Young don't come till like '89 or '90. So there's like a couple years there, but this is their debut, that they were signed to. I think it was Interscope. They were one of the earliest groups there, if I remember.
And they're from
correctly.
LA too, right? Or something?
They're from Orange County. They're from
Okay.
like near Anaheim. Yeah, but
Got it.
Ska Central, right?
Yeah,
Like that's
really.
kind of the
Yeah.
the Tragic Kingdom, right? That's why
Yes.
it's called Tragic Kingdom, because they're in Anaheim. So there you go, Josh. But yeah, and they're all kind of from that area. Their vibe is such. So yeah, this one did not light the charts, the sales up. In fact, they famously were almost dropped and had to self-fund their second album, and pretty much, I won't go too much into it because we're gonna do Tragic Kingdom, but Matthew Wilder, the Ain't Nobody Gonna Break My Stride guy, comes in and is their producer, and basically that's the record company's last gasp of saving the band. So production wise, that's one. And then also famously, what changes from the first two albums to the third one is that Gwen Stefani becomes the primary songwriter instead of her brother, because this is her brother's words through her.
Got it.
So that's, these are Gwen singing songs, not Gwen writing songs, which I think you could tell a little bit in terms of the lyrical content. There's definitely a shift. I don't know how familiar you are with Tragic Kingdom, but
It's been a minute since I listened to it.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's got a specific theme of what it's
Yeah.
about, that album, which we won't cover that quite yet. So I, believe it or not, I actually know this album very well. I got this album on it when I was first getting into ska, like around '93ish. And it's kind of crazy that I remember somebody having this on tape, which is kind of interesting because this album didn't sell particularly well, and the
Yeah.
band was not touring at this point, because the story I always heard was that like Gwen Stefani had like a curfew. She grew up like very conservative in her family, so they didn't really allow her to tour too much at the beginning. But somehow these guys got on my radar, and I did end up seeing them very early into when they broke, and I certainly was aware of them. And by the time Beacon Street Collection comes out in '94 and like Total Hate and stuff, they were on my radar for sure. So I kind of came to this one a year after it came out. What'd you think? I'm fascinated to hear what you think of this one, Josh.
It's obviously I'm familiar with No Doubt, but I didn't realize how kind of early on in the ska scene they were, and like how kind of ska dominant this album was. And
well, they were formed as like Two Tone and Madness super fans, was kind of like, that was their lane, like the Specials, Madness, that was like what brought all of them together. And they famously wore their, at least in the Tragic Kingdom era, if you watch their videos, Terry Hall's in one, they're wearing a Madness shirt, it's all over. So
yeah, well, that sound is apparent on this album, and I enjoyed listening to it. It's amazing. Well, I mean, it makes more sense now that you said they've been around since '87, but it's amazing how kind of fully formed Gwen Stefani is as a singer on this album. She has such like a power, and she is like the platonic ideal of a female like ska singer. I think she like just embodies.
She basically creates the
I
genre,
know, the template.
Well,
yeah.
let me amend that. She takes a lot from Pauline Black of the Selector and the Body Snatchers lead singer, Two Tone one. So she gives her own vibe, and Orange County's it a little bit, but it would be false to say she's like the patient zero of it, because
Sure.
if you listen to the Selector and the Body Snatchers, you'll see a little bit of what she's and Debbie Harry.
Yeah,
like
that's
her,
true.
or it's sort of the things.
But
she's
still,
thinking
like
of.
I
But
think
yeah.
for an entire generation of people, that
Yes.
she is the text of a ska singer, and so I mean, she
Yeah, male and female in some
Yeah.
ways, because a lot. Yeah.
yeah, but it's so interesting because I never really, I was into ska too, but it's probably more mid to late '90s, and I never really associated, because by then Tragic Kingdom, they were already kind of like moving away from ska, or had moved away, or
Right.
kind of less involved, and so I never really lumped them in with that. And this is like a full on ska album in like the vein of like Real Big Fish or
Oh, yeah, ska and new wave, I'd say, are
Toasters
the
or
two.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think lyrically it's kind of a little simplistic and formulaic, but the sound is really good. And Trapped in a Box got stuck in my head for the whole week that we were
That was the
leading up
single
to
that
this.
they thought was gonna break them. And the video is. Did you watch the video?
Yes, I did watch the video.
It's
yeah.
like the cutest version of Gwen Stefani
Yeah.
ever. She's just in overalls, and the rest of the band looks like
she
they're
is she looks like
20.
a teenager, or like really
Yes.
young.
They all look young in that,
Yeah.
because they are. I think she's 22, and the rest of them are not
Yeah.
too far from that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a more innocent time for the band, clearly. And so yeah, I enjoyed this sound, and it feels, I don't know, it just, ska always kind of brings me back to a certain time and place, and nostalgic for a certain time, and this cashed in on that feeling. And they have such a good energy to them, and the DNA for what comes later in their more famous albums is here from the present. And I don't know, they have a good vibe, and I can kind of understand why this like wouldn't make sales, but I think it probably, I don't know, developed a cult following in some ways, or it is also reminiscent of kind of that
They were a pretty
County
popular
sound.
live band. Like,
Yeah, I
from the
can imagine
beginning.
this would be
Yep.
a really good show. But yeah, I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I'll just go ahead and give Matt's take on this. He's gonna hate this album. Like, as I listened to us laughing, I was like, boy, Matt's gonna really fucking hate this album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always do process No Doubt as a ska band, because that's how they first came to me. I totally get, though, that it sounds like you were getting to them at Tragic Kingdom, even into Return
Yeah.
of Saturn, and by
Yeah.
that point they were sort of defined by the fact that they were moving away from it.
Yep.
Now, Tragic Kingdom still had a fair amount of ska on it, but it was a lot more new wave. There's more pop music here and ska, I'd say,
Yeah.
with a little bit of new wave built into it. And the new wave vibe definitely, by the time Tragic Kingdom comes, I think has sort of almost overtaken the ska a little bit
Yes.
on it. But the first two albums, there's a lot of ska. And I just think this is like an almost undeniably fun album.
Yes,
As you listen to it,
definitely.
it just puts a smile on my face. There's just, you're right. The songs are kind of like, about having a toothache, and, being consumed by TV, like Trapped in a Box,
Being
or
hungry.
hungry. Yes. It's just, these are not deep thoughts. It definitely seems to be Eric Stefani's sensibility. He, of course, the story is he leaves No Doubt when they start to sort of move away from why he started the band, which is basically an homage to it. You hear a lot of madness in this, like a lot of madness. The songs that like Baggy Trousers type madness, where they're just writing about bed and breakfast man. We
Yeah.
didn't cover those songs in the Madness album we covered, but there's a lot of that zaniness in this, and
That's
there's
a good
little.
word. Yep.
Oh yeah, that's kind of like what defined them, the first two albums.
Yeah.
And I think when they moved away from it, Eric Stefani's like, cool, I've got another job. I'm gonna be an animator on Ren and Stimpy and The Simpsons, and you guys
Really?
have at it. And
didn't
so,
know that.
oh yeah, that's what famously he draws No Doubt into the Homer Palooza episode. At
Oh,
one point, if you
that's
look in the
funny.
background, you'll see the four members of No Doubt are drawn into Homer
That's the one that
Palooza.
Sonic Youth and Smashing Pumpkins are on.
That's the
Yeah.
one where Homer
He
says
gets hit
Smashing
with a
Pumpkins.
cannonball.
Matt always quotes the one thing where like they introduce themselves as Smashing Pumpkins, and then he says like idling wildly or something. I can't remember what it is, but
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And he meets Thurston Moore and Kim Gordon in the crowd, and
Yep.
it's pretty funny. But yeah, there's The album loses a little bit of steam towards the end. I'll say that. I
Yes.
think like the reprise of Brand New Day and A Little Something Refreshing and Sinking are not my favorites, but there are some songs. There are some songs that I was able to sing along with them because back in the day I remember them and it was like, oh my gosh, like Get on the Ball and Big City Train are the ones
Yes.
that immediately like pop into it. And it is very clear from the beginning a couple different things. I think the background group of No Doubt is often underappreciated. Tony Kanal's a really, really good bassist. I think Tom Dumont, he was defined by like a harder rock influence. That's where he came to the band, and Adrian Young. They're a lot, but sometimes it's kind of like No Doubt's Gwen Stefani and these other dudes. And I'll from time to time like hear No Doubt songs, and you're reminded of just how good like the rest of the band is behind them. And I also was reminded of it when they put out an album a couple years ago. They put out an album as a group called Dream Car, and it was the three of them with Davey Havok from AFI as the lead singer, and it was basically like a love letter to like synth 80s. So think like kind of what No Doubt sounded like when they covered It's My Life by Talk Talk, but if you made a whole album of it. And I don't know how well you know AFI, but Davey Havok kind of works perfectly with what the rest of those guys sound like.
Okay.
So they just traded one charismatic lead singer for another one. But,
Yeah.
They're coming back. Gwen Stefani did a thing where she kind of brought them all on a Zoom. And it's like, hey, guys, I'd like to, play music again. Would you be up for that? And they're kind of like, yeah, very Orange County, right? Like, yeah, we should do that. Would you like to do so? And you could see because, like, so my take is I'm a much bigger fan of Gwen Stefani in the context of No Doubt, where I love her, outside of her solo, where I'm apathetic to her.
Yeah.
And I also am super happy because she's gotten like her happily ever after, which she's thought about trying to find her entire life, apparently, with country guy Blake Shelton. God bless them. I couldn't be less interested in a couple in the world, but I'm super glad she's happy because it's there. With that being said, I have no interest at all in the music the two of them are making. So I was pleasantly surprised to see how excited she seems to be about doing the reunion, because I thought she'd kind of crossed over to, I'm just going to make, love ballads with Blake Shelton. And you know what? I wouldn't even begrudge her for that. I'd say, you know what? Go find your muse, Gwen, because I know it's been a tough there, but I'll be lying if I'm like, okay, good. She's coming back to do what she was born to do, which is front this band while she still can. And you're right, though. Like, her vocals are, it's amazing how it's like she's a star. And I think famously, like, Jimmy Iovine, like, sees her and it's like, this girl's going to be a star in 5 years. And there's all these funny stories that are all, you could tell how someone would say that and how it would be true. Also, you listen to this album, you're like, this is the oddest fucking album that people think it's going to break in 1992. It's obvious that there's no chance in hell that this album was ever going to be commercial in 1992. I think there's a famous quote that K-Rock in LA said it would take an act of God for this to ever get on the radio, this album. And then like 4 years later, they make Tragic Kingdom, right? So it's, but with that being said, what K-Rock said wasn't wrong, because it would have taken an act of God to get like, I mean, the single's Trapped in a Box, which I really like, but you just, where does this fit in 19? There's nothing that we've listened to in 1992 that not only does nothing sound like this in the mainstream, because, even the ska that surfaces even 3 years later, it is nowhere near the charts or signed on major record labels at this point. And it's funny because Gwen hasn't even cultivated that, like, Hollywood platinum blonde persona yet. She's just like kind of the girl in the band right at this point. So they don't even have that going for them. But from the beginning, they just have that je ne sais quoi that you can see even here, that, once, the catalyst of like that breakup and finding their image and, expanding sounds comes in, you can see how it's big. But I like to revisit that from time to time because, I'll just, I'll hear like, those chorus, there's just those undeniable, like goofy, smiley choruses, like, I will always find you waiting for that train to come through. Like that pulsating, it's just, there's just something very catchy and ear appealing to me that I know you also enjoy. in the genre, Josh. And conversely, we know Matt hates, and
Yeah.
so this would be like Chinese water torture for him to listen to this, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Any
definitely. I just really enjoy her voice, and it's been a long time since I heard, now she's just on that, America's Got Talent, or I don't know, one of those shows, the Voice or whatever
right.
it is.
The one where she met the husband.
Yeah,
The
and
Voice,
I don't
think, yeah.
watch any of that sort of stuff, so I have no context for what she does now. But
Well, and she did the sort of like the solo career with, Bananas and Hirajuku Girls or whatever. Just a lot of stuff that, I mean, there was some stuff like Let Me Blow Your Mind that I enjoyed, but for the most part, I was just kind of like, is another No Doubt album coming? Kind of like I was waiting around for it. It just didn't hit me as much. Once again, didn't begrudge it, but it wasn't my thing. So,
yeah,
so
good stuff.
enjoyable. And you might want to check out Beacon Street Collection if you like this one.
Okay,
There's some stuff on there that I think would be pleasant to the ear as well.
sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.